Reading Jesus' teachings on the days of Lot can also help illustrate the differences between the Great Tribulation and the day of the Lord. So we're talking about a reference that right now is found in Luke 17:28-35. And here's what he has to say. The days of the Great Tribulation can be compared to the days before the destruction of the city of Sodom. People who lived in Sodom lived lives in utter depravity and rebellion against God, right? Read Genesis 19, Ezekiel 16, and Jude 7. And Eggman says they thought nothing of violating visitors to their town. These people fully fit the description found in Romans 1:28-31 and 2 Timothy 3:1-4. Those two references, by the way, I'm speaking to the good friend of mine in the Skype room right now, my study buddy. We were just chatting about this topic before the class began, and I was making a reference to Romans, and I mistakenly said Romans chapter 2, but I meant the end of chapter 1. And when I said Peter, I meant really Timothy here. These are the two references that were in my head, but I just got them wrong. These two references we're just going to read here in case you're wondering what they say. So let's let Brother Eggman quote them. First one, Romans 1:28-31. Brother Eggman is saying that this is the state of affairs in the world before Jesus returns. This is a description of what humanity is going to be going through. Remember, there's three basic segments of humanity that are in view in any given time in the Bible. We could get a little more granular if we wanted to, but at a zoom out level, we're looking at the world in large, which basically represents unbelievers. Then we've got national Israel, which represents the covenant people of God, but yet still largely in unbelief. And then we've got the church, and the church is made up of both believing Jews and Gentiles. So when we're reading through the Bible, it's helpful to ask yourself which one of these three groups is being described and characterized by any different passage. And I'll just tell you in advance, in Romans 1:28-31, Paul is largely describing the world with their wickedness, although sadly, there are those in unbelieving Israel who have a religious shell on the outside, but are really wicked at the heart level. And so they're moral and ethical, but really on the inside, they're corrupt. And then we have a lot of people in the church that think they're Christian, but they're deceived. So they really fit the category of the world also. And then, of course, we have genuine believers, true people who are washed clean from the inside out. And so they are really not the description of people that are here. So just listen to the list that we're going to read here in Romans and Timothy, and just understand that this is a description of the last days, the state of affairs in the world before Jesus comes. And this is what we can kind of expect to see in the world around us. Paul says, furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he's speaking of the world in general, he gave them over to a depraved mind to do what they ought not to, what ought not to be done. So we're talking about the wicked masses of humanity. Verse 29, they've become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They're full of envy. Listen to this grocery list. You do not want to be on this list. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, and ruthless. So Paul just lays into them, of course, the Holy Spirit prompting him. This is going to be what the world's like. It's always, to some measure and degree, been like this. But what we're talking about is a maturation of evil before Jesus comes back. When I say maturation, remember, Yeshua gave this parable in Matthew 13 about the wheat and the tares that are growing up together, right? There's this field, which is the world, and there's the wheat, which is the people of God, the holy people, the righteous ones, the saved people. And then there are tares, which are the wicked ones, the seeds of the adversary that were sown by the devil himself. That's according to Yeshua's parable. And what do the angels say? Lord, should we rip them all up now? Should we go and rip up the wheat, the tares that someone sown? And the God says, no, just let them grow together. Let them both mature And then when the time comes for the harvest, which is, of course, the end of the age, I will send my angels and they'll gather out of my kingdom all of those evil tares and they'll throw them into barns to be burned. And then I will gather the wheat into my barn, meaning Yeshua was describing this process of separation between that which is genuine and that which is false. This list we just read about is a list of the maturity of the wicked just before Jesus comes back. So we could rightfully put that theme back into 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 when Paul talks about the great apostasy and the man of lawlessness, keeping in mind that the word apostasia there in the Greek is likely not talking about a departure physically from earth, as in rapture. The context really demands that he's talking about what he just mentioned, what Paul just talked about here in Romans. It's the state of affairs in the world and in Israel and in the church, right? Even genuine believers, although they might not fit that list we just read, there's still people that are in the church that need to be purged out of the church. Right? They need to be shown for who they truly are. That separation, like Yeshua talks about bringing the sword in the midst of his people to separate truth from error, to separate the genuine from the fake from the real. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Let's keep reading. 2 Timothy 3:1-4. But mark this. Now Paul's talking to Timothy. Listen, it's the same description, same maturing of evil and wickedness just before the time of the rapture, which when we're talking about separating Satan's wrath from God's wrath, in the context, what Brother Eggman is going to go on to show is that it's necessary to see how that when Satan has his day during the wrath of Satan that's poured out, for the most part, the world will be as good as it's ever going to get. Does that sound kind of strange to you? Even though from God's perspective, they're as wicked as they're ever going to get. On the inside, God sees the heart, and they are as wicked and evil and corrupt as they will get. And there will be a lot of wickedness externally, but affluence is going to be prevalent also in the earth. There seems to be a measure of peace and safety that they're going to recognize. They're even going to cry, peace and safety. Yeah, we're peaceful. We're safe. We've got it we've got it good. And why not? Antichrist is going to provide for it if you take his mark. So let's read 2 Timothy. But mark this, Paul says, there will be terrible times in the when? The Achret Hayamim in the Hebrew, the last days, meaning the days leading up to the coming of Messiah. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good. Wow, this is a horrible grocery list to be on, right? Treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. So that's this is scathing. This is really God looking at the state of affairs in the world and saying, you are ripe for judgment. And just like God judged the world in the days of Noah, God is going to judge the world again in this last evil generation that leads into and goes into the 70th week and embraces the mark of the Antichrist and lives their lives the way that God just described them here. So, I mean, when I read that list, it just makes me shudder. So you don't want to be on that list. Why not? Because judgment is going to fall on you. But what about the righteous? Let's keep reading. Brother Eggman says, God will give the people of the earth what they want. He'll give them over to depraved minds, and they will engage in unrestrained sinfulness during the Great Tribulation. Just like the people of Sodom, they will be unconcerned that their actions are storing up the wrath and judgment of God. The fire that came from heaven to destroy Sodom can be likened to the day of the Lord. As soon as the righteous had been taken out of Sodom, the judgment began. Let me pause and let that sink in. Jesus gave these two examples in Matthew chapter 24 as Olivet Discourse. It also shows up in Mark and in Luke, but prominently in Matthew and in Luke. And in the Luke account, we get the Lot description as well. The state of affairs in the world demands that God judges those wicked people. But before the judgment falls, in the flood account, it is the rain waters that came down and the flood waters that broke up the deep from the deep. That is the judgment that swept humanity away in the waters. But Noah was rescued, he and his family, from the doom, from the destruction. You have to look at the big picture. Don't get stuck on the words taken and left and things like that. You have to look at the big picture. The end result is that of all the millions of people that were on earth that day, that in that time, only Noah was saved. Understand the salvation language, the wrath language. The themes of the overall arching theme is that Noah was rescued from judgment. He was spared the judgment because he was deemed by God to be righteous. Likewise with Lot, when we're drawing the similar comparison, and Yeshua does this in the book of Luke, in the Olivet Discourse reading there, the city in focus to be judged is Sodom and Gomorrah. So the bigger picture is that there's a place that is ripe for judgment because of the wickedness of the people. Just like in the bigger picture with the flood, it's the entire earth. God limits it to Sodom and Gomorrah this time, right? Thank goodness for God's mercy, right? He could have just purged the entire earth again, but he didn't. He only focused on Sodom and Gomorrah to teach us this lesson. And the lesson is the same as the one in the flood. The wicked have to be judged. And so God purges Sodom and Gomorrah, but he purges it of its wickedness. In other words, he wipes it off the face of the earth, so it's not in his sight anymore. That's what I mean by purges. But before he does that, he rescues righteous Lot from the impending doom. And the bigger picture is the same. Its wickedness must be judged, but first God rescues those who are righteous. So it behooves us to notice a few major details. Who are the righteous and who are the wicked? That's number one. And also, what is the purpose of the wrath and to whom is it falling? And what is the purpose of the judgment? And then why are the righteous being rescued? What is the purpose of the salvation and who enjoys that position? So it's the same picture. That's why it's such a shame to hear people say, oh, when Jesus says two are in the field, one is taken, the other's left, you want to be the one that's left. You want to be the one that's left behind. You don't want to be the one that's taken, because the one that's taken is the one that's taken in judgment. I'm like, are you kidding me? Did you miss the big picture? Right? So, I mean, okay, I'm not trying to mock you, but please go back and read and understand that the context of what Paul's talking about here is the same thing. So let's keep reading, Brother Eggman. The destruction that takes place during the day of the Lord will not be instantaneous, but progressive, just like it was in say the picture with the Exodus in Egypt, where God's judging Egypt and those gods, and that false, that wicked religious system, so that he could rescue Israel from there. It was a progressive judgment that spanned like a time frame. So the day of the Lord will not be instantaneous, but progressive, and by the end of this time, all the wicked of the earth will be destroyed. So here's what we have. Jesus also compares the days leading up to his return with the days of Noah, right? Read the Luke account of the Olivet Discourse in chapter 17. Remember, the Olivet Discourse shows up in Matthew chapter 24, Mark chapter 13, and Luke chapter 17, as well as Luke chapter 21. In this example, Eggman says, the days before the flood are compared to the time of the Great Tribulation, and the day of the Lord is likened to the time period from when the rain began to fall on the earth to its end after 40 days and 40 nights. During this time of wrath, the people of the earth were killed through drowning. Whereas God destroyed the earth through water in Noah's day, God will destroy the earth through fire. Sorry, didn't mean to jump there. Let's try that one again. Whereas God destroyed the earth through water in Noah's day, God will destroy the earth through fire during the day of the Lord. 2 Peter 3, 6 and 7. So we've got the Timothy passage that we read earlier. Now we've got the 2 Peter 3 passage. And so we're trying to distinguish between the wrath of Satan and the wrath of God. But in this discussion, we're having this dialogue about why wrath even exists. And what we have is disobedient people on earth. When we're talking about Satan's wrath, we're going to find this out in a moment. Satan levels his wrath against God's people. Right? Understand that? Satan is attacking God and seeking to exalt himself. And in so doing, he's seeking to destroy the people of God in his wrath. But by comparison, God is at war against Satan. So in Satan's wrath, Satan's at war against God. But in God's wrath, God is at war against Satan, and God is tearing down Satan's kingdom and punishing those who are part of Satan's kingdom, those who refuse to believe the truth that could have saved them. Instead, God is leveling his wrath against Satan's kingdom and any who have joined Satan's kingdom via taking the mark and bowing down to him and recognizing that he is the God of this world. And so it's necessary to draw distinctions between those two types of wrath, but also understand that in general, God will allow Satan to have that time frame to not only exalt himself, but God will even allow, and this goes all the way back to Daniel, so you can't say that this is a New Testament theology only. God will allow Satan, via the man of Antichrist, to persecute and overcome and even kill believers, the saints, the holy ones, the righteous ones, those who are genuine believers. So Satan's wrath will be leveled basically at the covenant people of God, whether you're on a natural covenant level, the spiritual, physical line of Abraham, right? The physical offspring of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, i.e. Israel. He hates Israel, but he's obviously going to go after the spiritual line of Abraham as well, i.e. the church. So, and God allows it. God allows him to go after and to even overcome, to kill us, to take our lives. So that's the wrath of Satan. But God, by comparison, is going to cut that program short by the rapture, by the resurrection, by the initiating of the day of the Lord, and then God himself is going to pour out judgment, the likes of which the world has never seen before. Look at this chart from Brother Eggman's blog. We got parallels in the lives of Noah and Lot with the events of Daniel's 70th 7. And this is kind of where we've been talking for the brief moment. On the far left, in blue, we have the days of Noah, then we have the days of Lot, then we have generations before Jesus' return. And then along the top of the columns, the heading is the Great Tribulation, the Rapture, and the Day of the Lord. And I'm not going to read down through all of that. I'm going to let that sit on the screen for long enough for you to kind of do on your own, or pause the video if you're watching this in YouTube land. Pause the video and just read through that on your own. I'm not going to read it for time's sake, but it's important to realize, I'll just say this part in closing, it's important to come to the understanding that the types and shadows of the aspect of wickedness being judged and who's going to be rescued and who's not going to be rescued, and why Jesus brings these types and shadows into his Olivet Discourse. It's important for us to help us understand why we would have any discussion on, should we go through the wrath? Should we go through the tribulation? If so, why? Where am I in the scheme of things? Am I on the ark with Noah's righteous family? Or am I Lot and his righteous family? Or where am I in the scheme of things, in the descriptions that I read in the Bible? Am I in the world? Do I not know God? Do I not know Messiah? Am I in the church but just playing church? Am I a part of Israel? Where am I in the scheme of things? And it's very important that you understand where you are when the end times start to play themselves out. Let's move on with the rest of Brother Eggman's blog. All right, let's keep going like that. Give me a moment and just stretch that out a little bit. There we go. All right, here's what Brother Eggman says. We're talking about distinguishing between the wrath of Satan in the 70th week and the wrath of God in the 70th week. And let me just show you the chart so it's easier to follow along. In the Prewrath model that I'm subscribing to, that Brother Eggman also subscribes to, after the midpoint, we have the Great Tribulation commencing. This is the wrath of Satan being poured out because Satan is thrown down to earth in Revelation chapter 12. He's kicked out of heaven. He's thrown down to earth. So he takes up residency, for the most part, inside of the man of lawlessness. There's this perverse incarnation that takes place, as it were. Satan becomes Antichrist. Antichrist is empowered by Satan, is what I mean by that. I don't know if it's a true incarnation, so don't run away with that and say something that I'm not trying to say. But the point is, the Bible does tell us that Satan gives all of his power to the man of sin. During that time of the Great Tribulation, primarily a number of things will be taking place, but the ones that we want to focus on, I think I'm going to zoom that in. Can I do that? I want to go like, wow. I don't want to do that. Oops, I don't want to do that either. I want to go like that. There we go. Sorry. So primarily, what we're talking about is this slice on your screen right now. So we've got, let me go like that and one more down. Okay, so we're talking about a time frame that commences at the midpoint of the week. It includes the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord, or God's wrath. And important for our study is that Satan will be pouring his wrath out against Jews and Christians. But at the same time, he's going to be taking care of the world. He's going to be providing for them, providing peace and safety. Although it'll be despotism, it'll be tyranny. I mean, he's going to be ruling the world with an iron fist. Don't get me wrong. You know, it's my way or the highway. Worship me or die. Take the mark, or you're not going to eat or drink. You're going to starve to death. You're going to die of thirst, right? You're not going to have any provision. But for those who take the mark, I imagine Antichrist will say, great, I'm glad you joined the group. You know, welcome to the club. What would you like? And then just serve them up whatever they want. And God is also going to give them that. God will give them what they want. God give them over to the depraved mind. So what we're talking about is a time frame that commences after the middle point of the week, where Satan takes over Jerusalem, right? That becomes one of his power bases. He also allows a lot of what do we say? A lot of military movement to take place in certain places of the world to ensure that he is in control. So he probably will allow a lot of autonomy. I mean, he's got 10-nation coalition going on, but I'm not trying to get too detailed. Germane to my point at this part of our study is that the Great Tribulation will be marked by tribulation of God's people, both Jews and Christians. Jewish people will have some measure of protection because God will let them flee into the desert away from the dragon, Revelation chapter 12 again. So there's some protection there, but a lot of Jewish people are going to give in. They're going to take the mark and join Antichrist's side so that they can protect themselves, although it's a false protection. But by and large, Christians who are going to stand their ground, we're going to lose our life. We're going to die. But not all of us, right? There will be enough of us that are alive when Jesus comes back. The point being is that for the pre-wrath, and I'm rambling here, I should just stick to topic. The main point of this section is that the Great Tribulation is Satan's wrath. And this is in contradistinction to the Day of the Lord, which is God's wrath. The Great Tribulation is Satan declaring war on God, and the Day of the Lord is God declaring war on Satan. That's just essentially what's going on. The Great Tribulation is Christians and Jews losing their lives and being punished by Satan and God allowing it. And the Day of the Lord, God's wrath, is God punishing Satan and his evil empire and anyone who has taken the mark. And God alone will be exalted in that day. And by the pre-wrath reckoning, all of this starts at the midpoint of the week and largely runs to the end of the week, but there isn't an overlap. And there's an important reason why there isn't an overlap. So let's go back to Brother Eggman's blog and find out why there is no overlap. The Bible clearly distinguishes between the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord. It is after Jesus cuts short the Great Tribulation that the Day of the Lord begins. The Great Tribulation is a time of unrestrained sinfulness, whereas the Day of the Lord is the time when sin is punished. So we've got another table below that extrapolates on the differences between the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord. Didn't mean for it to jump there. All right, let's look at this table. I'm not going to read this either. Again, use your YouTube screen controls or whatever. Use your mouse or your trackpad and pause the video long enough to read the parts that you want to see. But this is important for our study on distinguishing between the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord. It is a signature feature of the pre-wrath model, distinguished over and against many of the other models that conflate the tribulation with the wrath of God and don't make a distinction between who's running the show at that time, who's being punished, and why. So I think this is a very important topic that warrants our attention as we're moving into making a case for the pre-wrath rapture. So just look at the table there. We've got a lot of verses running down the far left column there that back up or go to support what is the Great Tribulation. And then when we look at the Day of the Lord, we have a similar healthy amount of passages to show the differences between these two time frames. And this is a very helpful chart. It's very long. That's why I'm not going to read down through it. But I'm pausing long enough to let you guys, again, those in live class, you probably can't read this in the time that I'm scrolling. But in YouTube land, just use your pause button and dig in and go back and read all the verses on your own. So I'm going to assume you did that. Let's jump into Brother Eggman's blog and keep reading. The difference between the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord is well illustrated by examining the fifth and sixth seals. So let's look at kind of a shortened version of the topic that we're talking about. If we go to the book of Revelation and look at the fifth and sixth seals, at the opening of the fifth seal, the souls of Christian martyrs are seen in heaven crying out to God regarding the atrocities taking place on the earth. These souls are seen under the altar without resurrected bodies, indicating that the fifth seal opens before the rapture occurs.